Okay, you guys, I'm so excited for this episode of The Selfish Woman. I'm here with Christine Chang, and we are going to talk about all things relationships today. Christine Chang is a best-selling author and speaker based in Los Angeles, and her book, Show Up: Finding Love for Independent Women, has helped thousands of professional women all over the world create the relationship of their dreams. Christine brings calmness, ease, humor, and simplicity to relationships. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about talking to you today. And on a personal level, I have so many questions, and I feel like our listeners are going to really relate to this conversation, whether they're in a relationship or looking. I think it's going to be really powerful.
Oh, thanks. Yes, I think it's a much needed conversation, especially for modern women, professional women these days. A lot of us feel good in a lot of areas in our life, work, we have good friends, we have cool hobbies, but the love part sometimes can be challenging. And I know this very well because I had a really hard time with it dating before I met my husband. And then also after married too, the work doesn't stop, as you know. So I'm like, let's talk about this.
Yeah. So that's my first question. Why are relationships so hard?
Yes. The thing is, I get it because for me, for the longest time, they were so difficult because I didn't know. Like I was never taught how to create a healthy relationship. A lot of us, unless you're really lucky and your parents were really healthy as well, and they had fantastic communication skills, which many don't, and that's what you see growing up. And a lot of us are just left to figure it out on our own. And so as an adult, that's what I'm like, you know what? I really want to know how to create healthy relationships. So I sought that out. And this is not to, blame our parents. Everyone's just doing the best that they know how to, right? And so if you find relationships difficult, for me, I reached a point where I was like, what am I doing? Like it's not difficult for some other people. Some of my girlfriends, it just seemed easy for them and they weren't anxious. They weren't, I was like, what is that?
Right.
Like, it's me. It's something that I'm doing. Like, why are these feelings coming up? So the self-introspection is definitely step one, especially if there's patterns in your life. If something's happening over and over, the constant variable is you. And,
Right.
then that self-responsibility of what am I doing to cause these certain patterns? For example, it's not that all guys in Vancouver are this, or, or in LA. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh, yes. We love swearing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like Peter Pan fuck boys. It's not that. It's what are you doing that you keep choosing or attracting these kind of people?
Yeah. We're the common denominator. Yes. And I know for me, it took a while to come out of the blame game. And it's an easy way to decide like it's all their fault, and it's guys are fucked up or whatever. But then to start looking at, okay, but what are my patterns? How am I showing up that isn't contributing to a healthy relationship? I totally agree. That's the first step, and yet can be the hardest step.
Oh, it's definitely hard. It's so cliche. Everyone's like, but once you get to the other side, it's worth it. It's true. And, there are some lovely parts of personal growth and you get clarity and you feel very empowered once you take that responsibility. But it also involves diving into some places that can be really painful, especially a lot of our stuff stems from childhood. So when you start healing those parts, stuff with your parents, siblings, it's really scary. It's really scary. But once you do it, and I get tested that, I'm like, oh, okay, it wasn't as hard as I thought, and I'm way happier now. And the healing is a big part of it because that's what enables you to really start to show up different. Because a lot of times we'll start knowing things, we'll read books, listen to stuff like, oh, I know better, but the actions are really hard to match that. And I think once you start healing and you gain that clarity and confidence, that's when your actions can match.
Right. So what I hear in that is it's not necessarily that relationships are hard, but the way we're showing up in our relationship is creating that challenge.
Absolutely. It's always us making things difficult for
ourselves. I know. We're our own worst enemy.
And I mean, along with this, which is a great reminder, is to really cultivate the self-love, because through this process, you don't want to be beating yourself up like, I'm so stupid, why did I do that, I drove him away. It's, approach it with curiosity, like, okay, what am I learning here?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I want to do next time, or what do I not want to do next time?
Mm-hmm.
So the self-love portion is really, really important as well.
Totally agree. I liked this. You said that one of the questions you get asked a lot by women, strong, capable women, is there something wrong with me? Like, why are we wondering this? How did we get to this place? I wonder, thinking there's something wrong with us.
Yeah, it's well, for me personally, it was like feeling like I'm not good enough. And that was like the underlying thing I had to work on. And that's also is there something wrong with me? That was what I kept asking myself when I was going through this. I just felt not good enough, like I'm doing something wrong. And again, this stems from childhood,
Yep.
childhood stuff. But I'm here to tell everyone, like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing. And a coach had to tell that to me. A trusted coach had to tell that for me multiple times in order for it to really click for me. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with me. There's things I'd like to improve and gain clarity on. Like, if my end goal is I want to be in a loving, long-term, committed, intimate relationship, what do I have to do to get
Mm-hmm.
there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it was. It's not that something was wrong, just
Mm.
the clarity, like, what do I need to do to get there?
Right. So there's nothing wrong with us. We're not broken.
No.
And you talk about clarity a lot. So, and I think one of the things I read that you say is clarity brings confidence.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Describe that to us. How do we get to that confident place? How does
Sure.
clarity help us?
Yes. So in my book, at the end of each chapter, there's some questions you can ask, and they're really simple questions like, what do you want? What do you need? Because sometimes those don't match too. For example, for a long time, I wanted that type A go-getter guy. I found it very sexy, and I loved talking business ideas, and there was always a very strong attraction, but it was also be very explosive, and always including like fights and things like that. And emotionally, it didn't work for me. So that's where I had to adjust what I wanted and then like what I needed. I actually need a guy that's very patient and very grounded. That feels good to me. And slowly over time, I gained that clarity. I was like, okay, yeah, okay, this is actually what I want, is a patient, grounded guy.
So then your wants shifted to align with your needs.
Yes. Because when I gained that clarity, because I had dated a certain type for so long that I realized, like, if I want short-term relationships, it could work. But also there was a part of it that was very painful for me because I'm a very sensitive person. So emotionally, if I felt abandoned or left in the dust or like my needs didn't matter, it was extremely painful for me. And I didn't like it. I'd really like crying my ass out. I was like, you know what? Life is hard enough as it is. I don't want my main relationship to be the sort. Of course, things come up in marriage, and you're going to find stuff, but I don't want it to be the main source of my anxiety and sadness. And it's just exhausting long term. And so quickly, I was just like, oh, that's not what I want. Like, I can have friends. I talked with my girlfriends about business and stuff. That's where I do that. My husband is different. He is like my rock. Home is like a sanctuary. It's calm. It's easy. And those are things that I looked for. And so over time, I changed my nervous system too, where if a guy had certain qualities that I used to find attractive, I was like, oh, I don't want that. I actually don't want that.
That becomes your red flag.
Yes. And it's funny how our life experience kind of shapes how we move in the future, right? Because I felt emotionally left in the dust for so long. That became a priority for me when I was dating and, seeking out my future life partner, was, don't forget all the other components, but the first one, I was like, do not forget about the emotional part. If this part doesn't line up, it's not going to work for me.
Yes.
And so with the confidence, that is how I built the confidence, because I think it's really hard to communicate your boundaries and start saying no and cut things off if you're not sure what you want. Like, I think this works for me. I'll see. But if you know, like, oh, a person that doesn't have integrity does not work for me because that's my core value. So it doesn't matter how charming he is, how much chemistry we have, all this other stuff. If the integrity is not in place, that's an automatic no. So I got faster in sifting it and more confident in saying no. And it's very natural for the emotions of disappointment to still come up, like, oh man, like that sucks, because he's great in every other way, but you know what? He's not there, and that's okay. I'm gonna make space.
There's so much in there that's resonating with me. And I coach a lot of different kinds of women, a lot of corporate executives and entrepreneurs and moms, like lots of different types of women. But it really like the majority of what we talk about is relationships, right? It's like, I'm successful in my career, but I'm struggling in my relationships. And we talk so much about that. And what I see so often, and what I've done too, is exactly what you're saying. We come up with this ideal guy, and usually it's like based on looks, personality, whatever. And we ignore all that stuff that really matters. Like you said, the stability, the emotional availability, self-awareness, all that stuff. And we get sucked into these relationships and then come out the other side disappointed because ultimately it didn't give us what we wanted. And so what you're saying is so true, right? It's like, how can we align our wants and our needs? Because sometimes those wants are the, I don't know, the superficial part, or maybe it's from our trauma or patterns or whatever it is. And it's like, am I wasting my time by chasing my wants? I think that's something that a lot of women feel confused about.
Yeah. And a lot of times we learn these things over time as well. It's not all of a sudden you get into a long-term relationship, like you have everything figured out. Your values change as well over time. Like, I used to want this, but now I'm in a different place. And that's okay. That's okay to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that's there for a lot of us is the fear that, well, if I end this, like, he's really good on paper, or he's got all these great qualities. If I end it, is that it for me? Like, am I missing my last chance? There's a lot of fear around, never finding that person. Is it just this elusive? I think also it's like, am I asking for too much?
Oh, absolutely. I think that could be more difficult sometimes when the person is like a really solid person. By the way, just because someone's a good person doesn't mean they're the ideal partner for you.
Right.
But it is really hard to say no to something like that if you feel that that's your truth, versus someone who is like a clear asshole, or they don't treat you well. That's like a clear, like, I shouldn't be in this. But when they're nice, you're like, the same questions, like, is there something wrong with me? Am I being a brat for like wanting more? But
Yes.
right? But your truth, right? Your truth. When something's not aligning. And I mean, this is another thing, but if you're a high performer, I speak to a lot of high performers. A lot of us, we live in the growth. Like that's where we thrive, So if you've ever had a goal, like, I want to get here, you might have experience once you reach that goal, it might be like really fun for a very short amount of time, and you're like, okay, now what? Now, and you're on to the next thing. And so we thrive in that growth phase. So when you get what you want, and someone just shows up and they're everything you say you want, a lot of times we might find it boring, like, because it's too stable. Like, okay, now what? Like, what's next? Right? So that is also something I see that is common with high performers, is they're kind of like never satisfied.
Yeah. Stability feels boring because we're always looking for more and growing. And yet in a relationship, that's maybe what's keeping us in those unhealthy patterns.
Yeah, it could be. If you find that that's your pattern. But if you ask anybody, like, I've never heard anyone flat out say like, I want an unstable partner.
I want an asshole to date. Give me one of those.
It's a balance, right? You don't want too too stable and everything's predictable. You have to incorporate like surprise and all that novelty. We as humans, we need both. So, but it's just something not to overlook, right? Because you do, for a healthy relationship, you do want stability. You want someone reliable. You want someone who does what they say they're gonna do. That
Oh
also,
yeah. My love language is when your actions line up with your words.
yes, that is a good sign. And if someone can't do that, that is a huge flag.
Yeah. I know for me, and I'm going back to what you said about wondering if we're a bad person for just wanting to be happy. And if this isn't enough, even if the guy is a really great guy, he's not an asshole or anything. And I know for me, when I left my last marriage, because I've been married twice, I felt that because everything was on paper looked really great. But I felt like, I think I'm going to be happier if I choose a different path. And that's sometimes such a hard choice to make when it's not, when you're just choosing yourself, when you're being that selfish woman and being like, I think I'm going to be happier on a different path from you. I think a lot of women struggle with that. It's like, I've got to have a big reason. He's got to have to cheat on me or he has to be a jerk. But how do we make a choice for ourselves in relationships when there isn't any reason other than this is what feels right for me? I think that's really hard.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it does, some people can view it as selfish, right? But it's if you're not showing up as you and you're not the best version of you, I just feel like you can't even be a good partner to someone. And that is hard. I remember when I was in my 20s, it was my first long-term relationship. I didn't know how to break up with my boyfriend. We were together for 3 years just because I felt bad. I'm like, he's such a good guy. And it was to the point where he got clarity and eventually he did it, but I was just incapable. I couldn't do it. And I hear a lot of women say this because I think it's good to talk about that. It's not always a guy that's an asshole. Like sometimes they're great. And it's such a bummer when it doesn't work out. And so back to when we were talking about the list of what you want, there's the fun stuff, the qualities in the other person. But I think what's important to put at the top and prioritize is how you want to feel. Because long-term, day-to-day, how do you want to feel? Because if you feel good, so many people just say, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. Okay, so that's the goal. Let's go towards feeling good and happy. The other stuff is just details. Who cares what it looks like if you're happy? So that I think will help give clarity as well. Because sometimes that will also open up your mind to who you're with. Because sometimes we're so set on what we want. I want a guy that's this 6'4", whatever. But it's just, you might surprise yourself like, oh, you know what? This guy doesn't look how I imagine my future partner to be, but I feel really good when I'm with him.
And having that self-awareness to be able to check in and ask ourselves, how am I feeling when I'm with this person? How am I feeling when I'm not with this person? How do I feel when they're texting me? Like just that self-awareness of tuning into our own experience and not being so focused on them.
Yes, absolutely. That's the best indicator when you're dating. We like to focus on the other person, right? This, the paper stuff, the list,
Yeah.
your research. But first, just the best indicator is how you feel. And you think about the people in your life where you feel like you could be yourself, like the superstar version of yourself. A lot of times it's like our really close, trusted friends. So I used that when I was dating as a gauge. Do I feel that when I'm dating or if I'm with this person? And if something feels off, like I feel like I'm criticized or judged, or it's difficult for me to be that, that's kind of a sign. I'm like, I don't like how I feel right now. And this also, the self-awareness is important because it's just like, is this past conditioning that I'm feeling anxious or whatever, judged?
Right.
Or is it the actual person?
Right.
right? So, but your nervous system will tell you how you feel.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I was just like, whoever I end up with, I want to feel like the superstar version of myself. That is when I'm in alignment and I'm confident and I could just go for it. I just want someone who I feel like that with. And my husband, he gives it to me.
I love that. The superstar version of ourselves.
Yes.
It's a great little visual of like how I want to feel all the time, but especially when I'm with somebody, a partner. I think tapping into that makes sense. Am I feeling confident? Do I feel alive? Do I feel, nurtured, supported? All of those things. If you think of it like that superstar version of yourself, it's kind of a nice way to look at it, because I love analogies and visuals, and I think that's really helpful. I'm gonna use that one.
Yes, absolutely. And another list you can make is, because we know when we feel good and when we don't, but you could specifically make a list of what does it look like when I feel good. For me, for example, it's like I talk a lot, I get a lot of ideas, and I sleep well, things like that. And also make a list of what it's like when you're not doing your best. And for me, it's like I'll grind my teeth at night. Like I start to get really sensitive. I start to get really judgy of other people. I get sensitive what I think people think of me. I start shopping frivolously. Well, I always like shopping, but in a way where it's almost like it's filling a void. So those are great reminders. Like, wait a minute, I'm not in alignment. I'm not doing so good right now. This is the version of me that feels good.
Right. Yeah.
And I literally made a list. So I had a reminder of what the feel good version of me looks like.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about heartbreak, coming out of those difficult older relationships that maybe have been, traumatizing or hurtful, or just, a lot of sadness. How do we get our mojo back? How do we get that place back where it's like, number one, I even have the energy to consider like dating or finding a relationship. And number two, I feel like I've got that excitement back, and also not being so fearful of getting hurt again.
Yes. Yeah, it takes time. So it's a reminder to be patient with oneself. It's healing, basically, right? Like, have you seen a therapist, or, like, what do you need to heal? And I write different things in my book to give suggestions. There are things that I use to heal, but it's not a one size fits all thing. So I never say to people like, you need to read this book, you should go to therapy, because people respond to different things. And so you have to find what works for you in terms of healing. I do know that it's really important you have to really acknowledge your pain, because if you pretend that everything's fine, it's going to come back up. So the first step is acknowledging it. You have to say, and for like strong, independent women, sometimes that's hard for us to say, like, that hurt me. Like, you hurt me. And for example, I'll give an example with my parents. That was a blind spot for me that I healed before meeting my husband. My mom was obvious. I knew I had stuff with her. My dad, I was like, I'm a daddy's girl. Like, I love him so much. I didn't think there was anything. And I realized through talking with a life coach, there was actually something there with my dad. And he had done some things that were out of integrity. And my parents, they got divorced when I was 12. And I had said it many times, like, when people are in conversation, are your parents together or divorced? I'm like, oh, they're divorced. I'm like, oh, when did it happen? When I was 12. I said it hundreds of times. What I failed to acknowledge was that it made me really sad. I was mad, and I was upset that my dad never acknowledged anything. He didn't take responsibility for his actions. And so it was important for him to know that. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need him to do anything. Like, I love him so much. I wrote in the letter, this doesn't change anything about how I feel about you. And I was being 100% honest. It didn't. But I just want to say that what you did, like, it's not that you just didn't think of mom, you didn't think of Crystal or me either. Crystal's my
Right.
sister. You didn't think about your family. And you never said sorry, and it upset me. It really upset me. And I said, again, this doesn't change how I feel about you. I just want you to know. And I sent the email. And for me, I always had trouble with self-expression. So sending that alone was very healing for me. And the next time I saw him, I think I forgot about it too. I was just like, I just felt good, like, oh, cool. Like I did
Right.
something. And he knows. And then I saw him, and I did not expect this. I didn't expect anything from him. He's like an older Asian man. They're not very emotional. They tend to not be very emotional. But the way he walked up to me, like his head was a little down. I could tell he was uncomfortable, and he looked like kind of like defeated, And he said, I don't know why I'm so emotional right now. I'm so sorry. And he hugged me for a little longer than he usually hugs me. I was like, oh my gosh, it really had an impact on him, what I said. And from then on, I realized that that's all I could ever do, is tell people how I feel. You're never in control of how they respond to that. But I realized how important it was for me to tell people how I feel, and also acknowledge how I feel. That was very healing for me.
That's such a beautiful story. And I love that you expressed yourself without expecting a certain outcome, but just honored your own experience and gave yourself that opportunity to express it. And, and your dad gave you a beautiful response. But what I hear and what you're saying is really, it's more about your own expression, self-expression, connecting to your experience and articulating that. That was the healing part. And then I feel like, and tell me if this lines up for you, but your dad's response was like just that extra gift for you in your healing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it is more. And that's when you're on your way to healing too, is when you don't need that response. Like, it doesn't matter what's happening. It's just that you did that thing. I think
Yeah.
that's when and it does take time. I will acknowledge that there is there is frustration through the process when you're doing the personal growth and trying to heal, and like, when is things going to change? When am I going to stop being sensitive to this? And it can get really frustrating, but over time, if you keep at it, you'll get surprised, like, oh my gosh, it's finally happened. Like, I'm not reactive anymore. I'm not in tears anymore. I don't need that anymore. Oh my gosh, it feels so good.
Yeah, I agree. It takes time and it takes intention to do what you need to do to heal. And like you said, whatever that looks like for that person, for each of us. I know for me, it did take time coming out of my last marriage. It took, for me, it was, I would say, about a year of really intentional work. And then, like you said, one day I was like, oh, I didn't think about him today, or, oh, I didn't want to text him when something happened, or whatever. And I started to notice that I was just starting to slowly detach from that desire for the connection, the missing him. And then one day it was like, I feel like I can just let it go and really be happy for him. And the pain wasn't there anymore. So I totally agree. And it takes as long as it's going to take.
Yes. Yeah. It could take years.
Yeah.
And all you can do is do your best. And again, just being really honest with yourself, with your emotions. And, if you have a support system, friends or family or anyone to talk to about it, I think just saying the truth is very liberating. Like, I'm lonely right now, or whatever that might be, so that's still something that I'm continuously working on. It is that, the work doesn't stop. And with life, stuff happens forever. Stuff happens, and you're going to have to heal. It could be previous marriage. It could be falling out with friends. Like, that can be equally as hard, I feel like. With modern relationships, your breakup with, friends. So yeah, just really acknowledge that, and just really like you said, being intentional and
Yeah.
patient, because
Yeah.
it can take time. I think when I was dating, I think it took like 5 to 6 years for me to really, really get it to the point where I could show up and dating became fun again for
Right.
me. Yeah. Now I think I've learned so much as I'm getting older that it's probably quicker because I have more clarity of what tools really work for me. But in my soul searching before I met my husband, I think it was, yeah, a good 5 to 6 years before it really clicked, like, oh, this is what dating is supposed to be. It's finally fun. It is finally fun. I'm honestly confident now.
Oh, yeah. And I totally agree. And I talk to a lot of women about this too. It's like, if it's not fun, then maybe it's time to take a step back. But, it's tough. The dating apps are tough. A lot of people just hate them,
Yes.
and are not having fun. And I feel like that's a good sign to maybe take a break. But what's your opinion on dating apps? Like, what do you think? Do you have the women you help, do you get them on the apps? Like, what's your opinion?
To what you said, I think if you're not feeling good about them, don't go on them, because it's just gonna reaffirm everything that you think. Like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Don't go on it. However, if you're in a place, and sometimes you need a break from dating, that's fine. That take a break. But if you are in a space where you feel a little more optimistic and a little more open, it's just out of curiosity. Like, having a mindset of curiosity is a fantastic mindset to have in life. So just like, let me see what's going on over here. And I used to photograph weddings for a living for 15
Okay.
years. And I will say over 50% of the couples met on apps or
Yeah.
online dating.
Yeah.
Beautiful, smart couples. They're
Mhm.
out there. So it's really how you view it. And also, different things work for different people. If you really don't like them, you need to be socializing, which I understand is difficult right now. It's
Yeah.
limited with what's going on in the world, but there's ways of, outdoor activities, or even if as long as you're enjoying yourself and doing things you want to do with other people. You might not
Mhm.
meet your person, but the least you'll get is meeting like-minded people, and maybe that person will introduce you to your future person.
Mhm.
So it's just doing things. If you want to date, if you want to increase the chances of meeting someone, you have to be talking to people. So in whatever form that feels good to you. So usually your hobbies feel good to you, with
Yeah.
yoga, or beach volleyball, or book clubs,
Right.
whatever it is.
Yeah. It is hard when we're all working from home, living, more isolated lives. So the apps are sort of the way, we're not going out to a lot of events and stuff. So it has become that way to meet people. And yet it can feel really discouraging for a lot of women who are on there going like, where are all the good men? Where are they?
Yes.
And I think that makes it hard, feeling defeated.
Oh, for sure. Like when you start to feel like hopeless. Oh, that it's I hate that. But
Yeah.
it comes up in all aspects of life, right? Like my husband and I, we bought a home last year, but that whole process, I was feeling hopeless, like crying. I feel like if you don't cry once during the home buying process, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But that hopeless feeling, like, oh my gosh, when, or is this going to happen for me, for us? So yeah, and it's okay. I think it's a natural part of the process too. Sometimes it gets really frustrating,
Yeah.
but I think it's important just to stay open, take breaks when you need to.
Hmm.
And there are also, remember that there are good people out there. Like, you're single. If you say there's no good guys left, there's no good people left, like, what does that make you?
Right.
Don't say that. Don't say that. They're out there.
They are. And I can talk from experience. I started dating last summer and I had a great time. I had such a fun time. Everyone I met was lovely. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how I show up, my patterns, when I would get triggered, what was that about? And I would go back to therapy and work it out. Like, I learned so much and I actually got way more confident through dating.
Yes.
then I think if I just been sitting alone, trying to work on it, it's like, no, the more I just stepped into that fear of like meeting someone new and, you know, putting myself out there, I started slowly gaining confidence. And so for me, there are amazing guys. And look, Vancouver has a reputation for being a really hard city to date. And everyone talks about it. The men are flaky, they don't want to commit, they won't pursue all of these things. But I did not experience that at all. And I think it was just my perspective of like, cool, like let's just try it. I'm not going to put any pressure on what's going to happen. And I ended up having a really like one of the best summers I've ever had. It was so much fun.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That is the key. Just have fun. That's also when you're a magnet. Like people want to be around others who are having fun.
Uh-huh.
Versus the mindset of I'm going to get this right. I want to get this right.
Yeah.
Like that is like imposing, pressure on the situation, which
Totally.
doesn't feel good. Even if it's like people can feel it, even if you're not obviously saying anything about it, they can feel it.
Totally.
So I love that you had a great time dating.
Yeah.
And it is so true. It's what you believe is you're going to look for those things. That
Uh-huh.
is going to be your reality. So
Yep.
if you're like, these guys suck or whatever, you're going to look for those reasons why they suck.
Yep.
So
And I mean, I hear a lot of the guys I dated too, they'd be like, I can't tell you how many first dates I've been on that felt like a job interview. And the women are like, how much money do you make? Do you own your home or rent? Do you do, and the poor guys are like, I just want to have a drink and have fun, And I think women can get very like blinders on like I'm looking for the one. And so like, I need to know instead of just going in and having a good time and seeing what happens.
absolutely. And I think as we get older too, because we don't want like, at least for me too, I'm like, don't waste my time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't be like let's get clear sooner, But I mean, you also it's nice to have your and like intention in
Mhm.
mind, but to have fun. Like in life, what is the point of doing something if you're not even enjoying it? Like, isn't the whole point of getting into a relationship so you feel good, right?
Right.
Not to check off like I did this.
Yeah.
Because that could still feel empty. You might get your list
Right.
and check and you're just sitting there like, okay, versus if my goal is to have fun and feel good. I don't care what that looks like, if what title that looks like or what that person looks like. If I feel good, I feel fucking good. So I think your approach to dating is excellent.
Thank you. Ooh, I get a gold star from Christine. I'm not dating now though. I was like, hey, I need to take a
Okay,
break
yeah.
because it takes
Okay.
a lot of energy and focus
Oh,
too.
it does.
So
Oh,
I'm like,
absolutely.
just I'm chilling now. I'm doing me for a while. But maybe in the spring when things warm up again. It's hard to date when it's like raining and cold. There's nothing to do outside. What are you gonna do? So, taking a break.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So if you could give like your top tips to us busy, professional, amazing women who are looking for a relationship, what are some of your top tips or advice for us?
Oh, sure. Number one, I would say stay open because a lot of times we think we're open, but we're not open. And someone, when I was single and they were married, I sought out talking to married couples who had marriages that I admired because I didn't have those examples growing up. And when you see that, they say like you're the average of people you're hanging around.
Mhm.
One, I saw what's possible. I saw how those women were showing up. It was like a blueprint for me. So one of them said, like you have to be open. You have to be open. And for a long time, I thought, I'm like, I am open though. But I'm like, no, I'm not. And the thing is, I do hear a lot of women say like, like, no, I think I'm open, but I can tell if they're not. Like, for example, they'll say, I want a guy who's like reliable, da, 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 da. And then I'll be like, what about this guy? Like, oh no. And I'm like, why? Like, I don't like how like his hairline or, something like that. And I'm like, I'm not saying they'll go marry this guy. I'm like they're not even open to having a conversation with
Mm.
them. And that's when
Mhm.
I know, I'm like, you're not even open. Just talk to the person. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. So I think that's important to keep in mind is to stay open, because again, when we were talking about like the lists and stuff, some you'll continually learn things about yourself, like, oh, I didn't know that I like that, or a boundary that you can soften. Like I really thought that this was a no, but maybe it's not.
Mm.
Maybe
Right.
I'm okay with it. To stay open, and then also I think uh curiosity. That
Yeah.
mindset is also a fantastic mindset to have. Curiosity, and it's just like that's what little kids do. That's why they're so awesome. Everything's so cool to them because they're
Yeah.
always curious. And it when you show up in that way to other people, I think respond better. Again, it kind of like releases the pressure. And of course, this is not to, you don't want to dismiss what you actually want. If you actually are looking for a long-term relationship, eventually you would like to get married or have kids, that is your truth. However, there's a way of presenting that information. What I
Mhm.
hear a lot of guys say that that is a turn off or that doesn't feel good is sometimes women will, for example, on the dating apps, they'll say, if you don't like this or this is this, like forget it, like swipe,
Oh, yeah.
like, and they're like,
Mhm.
that's such a negative way of saying it. Like you could communicate that, but in a way that doesn't feel so
Mhm.
negative. And I think there's truth to that, and that people in general are drawn towards positivity and people who are vibrant and energetic. The number one thing I hear from guys when I ask like what draws you to a woman, they'll say it's her energy,
Mm.
not the details. And you can feel it. You can't see it, but you can feel it. So again, that goes back to
Mhm.
make sure you're feeling good. So doing the things that light you up. And it could be, and again, I love lists. Apparently I made a list of this because sometimes I would forget, and I had a little post-it note taped on my laptop. What are the things that bring me joy? For example, going to the dog park at noon. I love dogs, and there's this one near my house where a lot of the dog walkers would come and they would each have like 10, 20 dogs. It was awesome. So if I was having an off day, I'm like, what's, oh, I can go to the dog park at lunch. I'll get some vitamin D and like pet the
Yeah.
dogs, and maybe I'll go to a French cafe after and get some pastries. Like I love doing that. So having a list of the things that make you happy so that you feel
Mm.
good.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the going back to the profiles, I agree. If somebody is being negative on the profile, it's an immediate swipe left. I actually saw a guy and we actually matched the other day. Because okay, I lied. I'm not dating, but I'm still on the apps. I'm still looking. And he said, you should not wear makeup when you go on a hike or doing activities or something like that.
Okay.
And so I just asked him about it. I was curious. I was like, I'm curious, like what you mean by that? Cause like I wear makeup. Oh no, that's all he said is like, you should be comfortable not wearing makeup. I was like,
Okay.
well, I like wearing makeup, so maybe we're not a good fit. And he's like, oh, I didn't mean to sound intolerant, but if you're going on a hike, you shouldn't wear makeup. And I was like, oh, I just find that really interesting when a guy's opinions about what women do with their bodies. And like, didn't hear back, right? But as soon as it's like, I don't want this, like, and I think a lot of women try to like do that right up front. It's like, if you're holding a fish, I'm not going to match with you, things like that. But you're kind of already putting out a negative front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people, I mean, unless they're a negative person as well, because you tend to be like a vibrational
That's
match,
true.
right? So if you want a negative judgy person, then you keep doing it.
That's true. No, that's all such good advice. Okay, I have a couple final questions for you. The first one is, how has putting yourself first changed your life? How has making yourself a priority helped you in your relationship?
Oh, it's changed everything. I mean, if you can't take care of yourself and put yourself first, I don't think you can show up to a relationship well and life in general, because that sets the tone for how others treat you. So my journey of building self-love, like no one can treat me better than me, including my husband, because he's not in my head. He's not psychic. I know what I need. I know what I need, and I know how to make myself happy. So the pressure is not on him to make me happy. Like that's a hard place to be when you're putting it on someone else. Like you should be doing this. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I do get in that space and I'm like, why aren't you doing this? Hold on, reel it back. Can I do these things for myself? So I learned how to do that, to put myself first, like, and my happiness too, my health, my happiness, taking myself on trips, stuff like that. It really helps me build confidence and as well, and set the bar for how I wanted people to treat me, because I would accept people treating me really crummy for a long time, just because I wasn't treating myself. I wasn't putting myself first. So me learning to do that has really shifted the bar, because I just didn't want something also mediocre too, I like excellence,
Right.
So right. So I'm like, I'm gonna do this well. I'm gonna treat myself amazing, and and it's really changed everything, because I think of how I used to view myself. My self-worth was pretty low, and having to build that confidence, and the people that I would attract would just not be good.
I love what you said, that no one can make me happier than me.
Yeah.
And that's so true, isn't it? And yet we look for our partners to make us happy when we're not doing that for ourselves. So that's so, so, so true. And yet so many of us have been taught or conditioned or modeled that putting ourselves last is the way to have a successful relationship. And I know I tried that and it didn't work for me. And so, it's tough for a lot of us to really align with that as a truth, that like when I make myself happy first, when I make myself a priority, my relationship is gonna be better, as opposed to like, no, be selfless and then it'll all work.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you'll also gain other people's respect too when you put yourself first.
Right. When you respect yourself enough to meet your own needs, you get that respect back.
Yes.
Yeah. That's so true.
Sorry, my dog is here.
Oh my God, your dog is so adorable.
Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy's here. Okay. If you could go back in time and say one thing to your little girl self, what would you tell her?
I think I would tell her, you're good enough, because I didn't feel that way growing up. Like, you're good enough as you are. And I think that's what kind of shaped me to be a high achiever too, because I felt like I was never good enough. So I'm like, if I do all these achievements, I'll be good enough. And that's kind of how I dated too, was more performative. Like, I need to work for this person's love to be deserving of it. And so I would tell her that you're good enough.
I love that. And comes back to that question that everyone asks themselves is, what's wrong with me? And like you said, if we had been told we're good enough when we're children, we might not find ourselves there, but now we can tell ourselves that. And that's so beautiful. Okay. You're in LA. I love LA, like we were talking about before. So I want to know, like, what's one of your favorite things to do in LA? You've already mentioned the dog park and the pastries, but what's something else you love to do there?
Oh, that's a good question. We live in Marina Del Rey now, and lucky for us, the beach isn't too far. So I just love going out to the beach, especially during sunset. So cliche, long walks on the beach during sunset, but it just brings me so much serenity and joy. And sometimes my friends will meet me out there and they have dogs too, and just so peaceful. I feel so lucky to live here.
The beaches there are amazing.
And I just like disconnecting, like not having my phone on me, not being in front of a screen. And it's so nice having that space. And you're in Vancouver, so you have like the water near you.
Oh yeah.
Where you have
Oh yeah. The ocean's like 4 blocks from me. So I'm there pretty much every day, and the same sunset, and everyone gathers and someone's playing the drums and someone's singing, and we all enjoy the sunset together. It is one of my favorite things to do too. And I love that you said that too, because I think a lot of people think LA, it's going to be like the hot spot, the club, the whatever, but we forget about how nature is so incredible there, and the beaches are so, I find the energy there just so magical.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same way about Vancouver actually. But it's a balance, right? Like you want the serenity, but also
Yep.
I have a side of me, like a
Well,
bougie side of me that want, like I'm planning my 40th birthday and then I realize I'm like, I'm gonna be spending a lot of money on this, like the way I want to have it. Of course, my taste, like I need the chicest venue and everything
uh-huh.
is so expensive. But I'm like, I only turned 40 once. So
Right. You got to do it big. It won't be a picnic on the beach. It'll be something fabulous.
yes, because I mean I feel like at 40, you usually like you have more money. Like, I'm like,
Mhm.
I could have the party that I want now. I'm gonna do it.
Amazing. I love it. Okay. Last question. How are you being selfish these days? How are you putting yourself first? What are you doing?
Oh, I'm always selfish. Well, what comes to mind is I okay, this is balance. So I don't work with my family business. My sister does. That was like my first selfish decision, was telling my parents I don't want to work in the family business. It just wasn't my truth. I felt so out of alignment. So I put myself first by, building my own life in Los Angeles, somewhere I really wanted to be. However, I've learned now that I'm getting older and my parents are getting older as well, there's a balance of, um, you know, taking care of myself, making sure I'm good, but then I show up better for them as well. Cause now I pop in and help them do company culture and marketing and stuff in a way that feels good, that I want to be doing it.
Mm.
It feels really good. Like I've changed since I was younger, where I want to help them, and that duty part of me it doesn't feel like an obligation anymore. It's like I want to. So I think the selfish part of me is actually living in LA, because if I wasn't, I would probably be living in the Bay Area near them. And
Mm-hmm.
but for now, this is my truth, and
Mm.
I love being here, and I could have it all. I could do both. I can take care of me, have my own career, and also offer them my skills, in with what I'm good at, which, with company culture and stuff, that's something that they don't even like look at. And I'm like, cool, I can offer them something and help as well.
I love that, because what I hear in that is when you put yourself first, you're creating the life that works for you, and you're finding ways to give back to other people in your life in a way that feels good for you.
Absolutely. And it feels good just to be authentic in that, sometimes you do things, but you don't want to do them. And I hate that feeling. It feels like obligation,
Yeah, it's a should.
right. And
Mhm.
and I'm like, I wish I wanted to, but I don't. But now it just feels really good that I want to. And I think it's also because I know how to fill my own cup. I don't feel like I'm abandoning a part of myself to help them.
Mhm. Amazing. Okay, Christine, where can we find you? How can we get into your world? Tell us all the stuff.
Sure. My Instagram is C Chang and Co. My book is called Show Up: Finding Love for Independent Women. If you're watching a video portion, it looks like this,
There
but
she
it's
is.
and
Beautiful.
thank you. And it is available on Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to go today and make my list of wants and needs and see if they line up. Super
Awesome.
helpful. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom. And this has been really fun.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, take care. Bye.